Let's take this show on the road. Same-ish, different day. I'll be bored out my mind. Hometown, love my place.
Hey friends, let's dye some yarn. Today I am going to dye fingering weight yarn, platinum sock. This is a superwash, 75% superwash merino and a 25% nylon in 100 gram skeins. Let's open that. And we are going to, let's add the water first. Because we need to soak our yarn first of all. So I'm going to start by adding just a little bit of citric acid, like half a tablespoon. The citric acid is what is going to make the dye adhere to the yarn. Now I'm going to add about 6 liters of water to my plastic container. You don't need a container as big as this one. It's just because I'm dyeing commercially as well. So you can make do with a much smaller one if you're just dyeing for yourself. So I'm just going to add in 6 liters. That's 2. And that's 4. And you don't need to have as much water as I do either. You just need to have enough for your yarn to get submerged so that it gets properly soaked. And there we go. 6 liters. And I'm going to grab, I think I'm going to dye 4 skeins today. Let's see if we can get them out of the package. Maybe. Oh, there we go. They are tied off so that you can find the loop. There we go. There it is. Oh, they are actually put in a tie with dye on it. Okay, and I'm going to put a zip tie just to keep them apart. I'm actually going to cut off this one with dye in case it drops dye while in the pot. Actually, I've never seen that before. I don't know why they do that. All right, 1 skein, and we will grab another one. Let's see here. There we go. 1 more. On with the zip tie. And no, yeah, that's another color to tie up. And 2 skeins. And 3, and 1 more. see where that last zip tie went. There it is. It fell down. Okay. There's the fourth one. I'm going to remove that colored tie off. Such a peculiar thing, I've never seen that before. Oh well. Alrighty. 4 skeins. And we'll be adding them to the water. Oh, I made a mess. There we go. And into the water they go. And we're just gonna press down to make sure everything gets wet. So now we don't have dry patches in my yarn. But then the dye won't sit here. And we want the dye to stick. Like so. There we are. And we are going to let that sit for about half an hour. And we're ready to dye. It is time to dye. Wow, that sounded ominous. Did not mean for that. The yarn has been soaking. And we are going to transfer it to our canteen that we are dyeing in. And first of all, I am going to add a tablespoon of citric acid so that the dye will adhere to the yarn. And we're going to add 3 liters of water. And today we are going to dye one of my absolute favorite colors. And it's also the color that is the most difficult to catch on camera. I don't know why that is, but it's just very, very hard to catch it. Okay, we have 2 liters of water there. And we'll get 1 more. So, I'm sorry, I'm keeping the camera. There we go. And now we're going to add the yarn. I soaked 4 skeins, which is perfect for a canteen this size. I will add in below in the description box exactly what tools I'm using and the dyes and everything. And I do have these dyes in my web shop as well. So I will link to that if you're interested. I just tuck them down side by side in the canteen. Try to spread it out evenly. Like so. And the last one. Let's see if I can get it. There we are. You don't have to squeeze out all the water. I just squeeze out enough so that it doesn't drip everywhere when I transfer it. Because it's going right back into the water in the pan. Okay. We are pretty much ready to dye. I'm gonna wash my hands a bit. Get rid of the citric acid. It tends to itch on my hands if I don't. Okay. So what do we need today? We are going to dye a colorway that I call Unapologetic. And for that I am using Chartreuse from Jacquard and Turquoise. Now mind you, Turquoise is one of the most difficult, maybe the most difficult color to dye with, because it is very powerful and it tends to get everywhere. So keep that in mind. Got gloves, teaspoons, got a bigger spoon to poke around in the water. I use these old yogurt containers with water so I can put the spoons in them. So I'm going to add some water into that. There we go. And last but not least, a mask to protect your airways, because this is a very fine dust and you do not want it in your airways. So let's put those aside. Put on the mask. Hope you can still hear me. Alrighty. I'm going to turn on the oven. And I'm going to turn on both of these two plates. Because you can also use an induction stove, that's just fine. And what I need to do, since I have a very old stove, living in Sweden, this is what it looks like. I will be moving the canteen around to make sure everything gets heated. It works just fine. Just keep an eye out to make sure all the water gets heated. Okay, I'm going to start with Chartreuse. I'm just gonna speckle some here and there. Chartreuse is also a color that tends to spread out a lot. Let's start with that. We'll save the spoon because we will be using it again. And I'm going to take, you can see this is a very pigmented color. So I'm going to be very careful when I start. It tends to take over completely if you're not careful. Not that I mind really, because turquoise is my favorite color, I'll admit. Alrighty, we're off to a good start. Now I'm going to remove the mask again. This I'm done adding. And we'll let this start to heat up. I'm going to poke it a little to push the dye down into the yarn. Just gently. Don't need to use force, especially the turquoise bits, because like I said, it tends to take over completely. There we go. I usually poke just the green first, then I gently poked the turquoise, just the green is lighter, just to keep the dyes a little bit separated still. I don't want to blend them too much, because like I said, then everything will turn out turquoise. Okay, start off there and we'll let it heat up. Things are starting to happen here. You don't want this to boil. It does not have to, it just needs to be warm. I'm going to be moving canteen a bit. I will be using this large plate the most, but then I will switch between the smaller one up there and the smaller one on this side, depending on how I'm moving the pan. The main thing is that water gets heated up in the entire pan, because when it looks like this, what tends to happen is that the middle part doesn't get heated. So you need to be watching out for that. I'm going to poke it a little bit more to make sure dye gets in everywhere. Be aware of each end where the yarn is sort of folded over itself, because that means there's a bigger risk that the dye doesn't get all the way in, because there's so much fabric there. So make sure to poke the ends so that you get the dye in everywhere, even there. As you can see, it's kind of wobbly. It's just because it's starting to heat up. So the bottom tends to do like that. It goes away. Okay. I'm going to turn it, because this bigger plate just heats up faster. It's starting to boil here and there, so I'm turning down the heat a bit. Like I said, it does not need to boil, it just needs to be hot. I think I need to add a little bit more turquoise around here. Now this is not an exact science. I just go by feeling, I guess you could say. Actually, that is what I do, so totally what I do. And very, very gently on the turquoise, because it is very overwhelming if you're not careful. There we go. Just gonna let it sit for a second. As soon as the yarn gets hot, it will adhere, the dye will adhere to it immediately. I'm just gently gonna poke it. I have a lot of dye here, as you can see it's very saturated. Get some over there. I can just take tiny spoonfuls and just move around as I see fit. And the idea here is that the dye should exhaust completely from the water so that the water is clear, or as clear as possible. And then it will be done. You want as little excess dye as possible once you're done dyeing. I'm adding in the plate underneath here instead. Moving it around to make sure it gets heated everywhere. This is a very meditative thing to do. And fun. I enjoy playing with color. Just poke around, make sure it's hot everywhere. You see the water is starting to clear up and exhaust. But we are actually going to flip the yarn as well and dye it from the other side. This is one of the 2 colorways that I do that with, just to make sure it's properly saturated. And you may have noticed I haven't used the gloves yet. I will do now though, because we are going to check if the water is hot in the entire pan. I'm not gonna recommend that you do it this way. This is the way I do it. Just find your own method to make sure it's hot everywhere. We're starting to get there. Yeah. I'm going to turn it over a little bit. See if we can get it a little bit hotter in this end. And then we're going to flip it. And be very, very careful when you're working with turquoise. Like I said, it is just the tiniest speck of dye will taint everything you touch. I'm going to poke it a little more. Poke it to make sure we get dye everywhere, but also because we want hot water in the entire pan. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Now I'm going to move the pan. So I'll set this aside. And I'm going to move the pan over to the bench here, because I have this such a short distance here that I won't be able to flip the yarn without hitting the fan. So let's do that. Put on some glove. You need to be careful because this is really hot. There. I got more space here to work. So I'm going to flip it. As you can see, there's parts that are lighter on the other side. So I'm going to flip it over to make sure I get dye in there as well. Let's see. And here you can see it as well. There we go. Try to avoid them tangling too much to each other. And there are some lighter spots as well. There you can see quite light. And the last one. There we go. And back on the stove. And we'll just keep poking. Add a little more dye if you feel like it. If you want deeper color or more color, I think I want a little bit more turquoise. Turquoise is my favorite color. I really like a lot of that. Just be careful. And not choke the other colors. Just moving dye around a bit. Quite a lot of turquoise, since I just added more of that. And I'm poking around to make sure everything gets heated. I'm going to turn the pan again, like so. Make sure everything gets properly warm. This is exhausting really nicely. Really enjoying this color we're having now. I might want a little bit more there. Just a tad. Twisting it around, make sure the heat gets everywhere. And it's not supposed to boil, it just needs to be hot. Turn my stove down a bit. I'm just poking down to make sure we get dye everywhere and hot water everywhere. Like I scoop it around, I will have patches that have more dye than others. I can just move it around in the pot. It's like painting. And there really is no right or wrong. This is not the way to dye yarn. It's one way to dye yarn. So this is how you can do it. It is not how you have to do it. You'll find your own techniques and your own likes and how you want to do it. So this is just a starting point. Basic things you need, how you can do it. The rest is up to your imagination. Okay, I'm actually quite happy with this. The water is starting to exhaust everywhere. Pretty much clear. Here and there there's a tiny bit of turquoise left. But since the water is hot, it will continue to exhaust while it cools off. So we're going to set this aside now and let it cool completely before rinsing it. And this is very important because if you don't wait until it has cooled completely, you will shock the yarn. And you don't want to do that. So let's set it aside. And lifting it aside. There we go. It's going to just sit there and cool until ready to be rinsed. The yarn has cooled off completely and it is time to rinse. I use this plastic bowl. You don't need to, you can do it directly in the sink if you want to. I just prefer using this one. And first of all, we are using cold water. This water is completely cold. And we need to rinse in cold water as well. And I'm using soap. I really like it. You don't have to have soap. You can use just, you can use shampoo. You can use what you use for your dishes. Anything goes. I do have these in my web shop, the smaller bottles, if you're interested. So, if you want that, it is available there. So I just add a little bit into the water. And we will fill the tub up about halfway. Should be enough. I'm very happy with this color. This is one of my absolute favorite colorways. And like I said, it's also the most difficult one to catch on camera, what it looks like. But I think it's coming across pretty well right now. Okay, that's enough. I'll just grab the zip ties and I'll squeeze out excess water. And I'll just tuck it into the soaking tub. And as you can see, the water is completely clear now. The dye has exhausted completely. Another one. And the last one. There we go. Just tuck it in there. I'm going to pour out this water. This is just clean water now. Since all the dye is gone. We'll set that aside. And I have a plastic bowl just to put the yarn in once I've rinsed it. I'm just giving it a little bath here, and we're going to find, let's grab that one. Just dunk it a few times now. And squeeze out the water. And I don't twist the yarn, just squeeze the water out. You could also use, if you have a centrifuge separate that you could use to get some more water out of the yarn, you can use that. Some people use a salad spinner. I tried, this is actually a bowl from a salad spinner. I tried that. I just find them too light and they just want to hop around when I use that, so I stopped using it. And we're squeezing out water. And since I'm using soak, I don't really need to rinse one more time. You can sort of leave this in. If you use shampoo or something else to rinse your yarn, you will need to rinse it more than once. I will rinse mine twice anyway, just because I want to make sure I get as much excess dye out as possible. Also beware of the zip ties. They sometimes tend to carry specks of dye on them. So make sure you get them on the water too and get them rinsed. There we go. And that's all for. You can see there's a slight turquoise tint to water. So I'm going to add water again. This turned out really beautiful. I'm very happy with this. I'm filling it about halfway up again. Something like that. And we're adding in the yarn again. Just giving it an extra rinse real quick. Try to get them down next to each other, not on top. Just to try to avoid too much tangling. Just tuck them in there a little bit. Give them a couple of dunks. Moving the zip tie a bit. There we go. And squeeze out the water. And again, I'm just squeezing, I'm not twisting the yarn in anyway. Second skein. There we go. Third one. And I'm going to be hanging this yarn to dry on just a regular drying rack, which works just fine. On a warm summer day, it will usually be dry in about 2 days. In the winter, it might take a bit longer. One thing to think about is when your yarn has dried for, say, 24 hours, you might want to move the zip tie to a different position so that you don't have the same yarn bent at the same place all the time, because this gets very thick. It takes a long time to dry. But just move it like so, spread it out on the rack a little, and it will dry faster. Okay, let's rinse the last one. And there we go. Now we're just going to hang it to dry, and we'll see what the finished result is. This is a colorway that I dye professionally, and this is probably my absolute favorite as well. But it's also the most difficult one to photograph or film, because it is I never seem to get it true to real life. But I hope you get an idea of what it looks like. And I would love to see if you try to dye this colorway yourselves. Please tag me if you do on social media. And also if you knit with it, tag me. I would love to see it.